Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, and still I rise, and I rise as a proud descendant of the enslaved people who constructed the foundation upon which the greatness of America resides. They are the foundational mothers and fathers of this country. Today I rise, Madam Speaker, because I was accorded the preeminent privilege of speaking at the Georgetown University Law Center. And I was accorded this opportunity to talk about the conscious agenda. In so doing, we, my staff and I, did some research on Georgetown University, and we discovered some things that I'll share with you today. But first, I do want to thank the persons who made it possible for me to have this opportunity to speak today at Georgetown. I'd like to thank Juan Thomas, the chair of the ABA section of the Civil Rights and Social Justice entity. This is an entity that is associated with the American Bar Association, and they were hosting this event today. I'd like to thank Dean Trenner. He is the Executive Vice President of Georgetown University Law Center. I'd like to thank Professor of Law Atonement. He is a person who has, quite frankly, helped to set a course of conduct that has made a difference in the lives of many people at the institution. So today, Madam Speaker, I, having had this opportunity to visit Georgetown, would like to commend the university for what it has done, and I'd like to do so for things that persons ordinarily might not assume one would stand before the Congress, the country, if you will, and give such a commendation. I'm honored to do this because I think Georgetown University is the supreme, superb example of what an institution should do that has had some association with the institution of slavery. I think that Georgetown University is a university that has set an example for the country, indeed for the United States of America itself, in terms of how we should respond to questions related to our association with the institution of slavery. So today, I want to honor Georgetown University, founded in 1789 by John Carroll, who was later appointed Archbishop of Baltimore in 1808. But I honor this institution today because it took affirmative action to correct its association with the institution of slavery. In 1838, 272 enslaved persons, worth about $3.3 million in today's dollars, were sold in part to help pay off the school's debt. Obviously, this was not something that I would in any way celebrate. It is something that I find horrific. So the question becomes, how has Georgetown University responded since this occurrence? Well, in September 2015, Georgetown University formed a working group on slavery. Slavery, memory, and reconciliation to explore this history that it has associated with slavery. In 2016, Georgetown created a Department of African American Studies and set plans to establish an institute for the study of racial justice. Now, these two things alone are significant. The notion that a working group would be established for reconciliation, to explore it, and to explore the memory, to understand what slavery was all about as it relates to this institution. This working group has done an outstanding job. But I also have to acknowledge the fact that the African American Studies program. This was something that would give young people the opportunity to better understand more than what happened at Georgetown. It gives them an opportunity to understand what happened to Africans in the Americas. Too often, this type of history is overlooked, and today there are many who would erase this history. Significant work at the Georgetown Slavery Archive has been done. And in 2017, Georgetown offered an apology. An apology. It was not an apology without something more, not just we're sorry it happened and please have a nice day. It was an apology, and they held a liturgy of remembrance, contrition, and hope. It was a sincere apology. It was an apology that would lead to other things. The apology wasn't the end. It was the genesis of more things that would be done. And in 2017, Georgetown dedicated 2 campus buildings to members of the descendant community. The descendant community would be descendants of slavery. Dedicated 2 campus buildings to members of the descendant community. It didn't stop there. Georgetown went on in 2018 at the request of descendant leaders. Georgetown, the Jesuits, and descendants began truth and reconciliation work with the Catalog Foundation. This is the kind of work that has to be done so that we can get to the truth about what happened, so that we can have the transparency necessary to understand the history associated with slavery. It is not pleasant, but it has to be done. Has to be done because if we don't do it, we allow ourselves to be vulnerable to these things being repeated. So let's study this history. And in 2019, Georgetown established a reconciliation fund that awards $400,000 annually for community-based projects within descendant communities. $400,000 annually. Georgetown did not simply give an apology with nothing more than we're sorry. Georgetown has taken upon itself to atone for what occurred, and has done so by having a truth and reconciliation committee, worked with the Catalog Foundation, went on to establish a reconciliation fund that awards $400,000 annually for community-based projects within descendant communities. I think that Georgetown merits a special thank you, and I, as a member of Congress, intend to have a flag flown over the Capitol of the United States of America to be presented to Georgetown University for the way they have demonstrated that we can deal with the issue of slavery, demonstrated how to do this. They have been an exemplar of how to do it and how to do it with a degree of credibility such that someone would come to the Congress of the United States of America, stand here and pay tribute to what they have done to commemorate the lives of those who helped create the great America that we live in today. They were the foundational mothers and fathers of this country. They were the persons who labored, they planted the grains, harvested the crops, they constructed roads and bridges. The Capitol itself has benefited from their labor. This very facility that we're in has benefited from their labor. The Washington Monument benefited from their labor. The White House benefited from their labor. Their labor has made a difference. And I would have the country, the United States itself, follow the example of Georgetown University. Follow the example. Let's have the Truth and Justice Commission. We need it, that the truth has to be told. And let's have the study for reparations. There ought to be some compensation for centuries of unpaid labor, labor without recompense, labor without compensation. There ought to be some atonement by the government of the United States of America. Georgetown University is the exemplar. We should follow this example, and we should move expeditiously to correct, to the extent that it can be corrected, the injustice that was imposed upon human beings of African ancestry. I believe that we who have the opportunity to stand in the well of the House of Representatives, who can vote on questions of war and peace, who can vote to fund various projects around this country, we ought to establish a Department of Reconciliation. We ought to establish a Department of Reconciliation such that we will have a systemic and systematic methodology by which this problem, this egregious concern, can be addressed. And it cannot be addressed in the term of any one president. It will take years, perhaps decades, to address the invidious discrimination that we have suffered in this country. But it can be done. We but have to have the will to do it. A Department of Reconciliation with a Secretary of Reconciliation. A Department of Reconciliation with a secretary and undersecretaries and a budget that is indexed to the Department of Defense such that it will always be funded, because we will always fund the Department of Defense. And if we do this, we can give this country and the world a sense of our wanting to atone for this 240 years of slavery that this country suffered, that people suffered, and in so doing laid the foundation for America's greatness. They are the foundational mothers and fathers of this country. So to Georgetown University, I thank you for what you have done. And I pray that this country will follow your example. Follow the example. Let's have the necessary commissions so that we can get to the truth. Let's study the issue so that we can understand what recompense should consist of. And then let's make sure that this is all done by and through a Department of Reconciliation. I would close with this. Reconciliation cannot be limited to African Americans. Some things bear repeating. Reconciliation cannot be limited to African Americans. There are others who have suffered invidious discrimination, and they too have to have reasonable redress for the suffering. We have to address the trail of tears, how people were uprooted from their homes, forced to migrate across the country. Many died along the way. There has to be some recompense for the trail of tears. We have to consider what happened to others who were a part of this country when the persons from Europe arrived, how they were treated. All of this can be dealt with through a Department of Reconciliation. The persons who came here and constructed the railroads, the persons who were placed in these camps so as to, in theory, protect the country from persons during a time of war. These camps should never have been imposed upon people. We have to, at some point, give redress. This is what a Department of Reconciliation can do. This is a great country, but the greatness of America has not been achieved until America provides a means for us to have reasonable redress for the invidious discrimination that was imposed upon people who meant us no harm, did us no harm, suffered, and in their suffering, America became the great country it is because they laid the foundation for America's greatness. They are the foundational mothers and fathers of this country. I thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.